I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Canon. We've been Disney fans our entire lives. And now, as childless adults, we're undertaking a journey through the media that shaped our lives.
Trying to find out if what made them special is still there.
We are
Rewatching the Magic. Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
Yeah, a lot of stuff happened since the last time we recorded, and I did put it in the blurb at the beginning of the last episode, but we're on iTunes now!
Woohoo! And also on Spotify.
Yeah, tell your friends, tell your enemies, shout it at everyone you see. And they're going to wonder, what the heck is a Rewatch the Magic?
If you do tell people about our podcast, please get the name right.
I'm getting my own podcast name wrong. And I chose it. I chose the name. So judging by the last week or so, our numbers are higher, so that's a good thing. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, welcome
so keep on.
to everybody who has joined us since last time.
Yeah, if you discovered our podcast through either iTunes or Spotify, welcome. Check the backlog and hope you stick around for the rest of what we're doing.
Yeah, and if you like us, leave us a review or, promote us to your friends, spread the link online. We'd really, really appreciate it.
And of course, we have that sponsor from last week.
Yeah.
And our friends over at MarsCon in Minnesota. I guess we'll just put that ad right here.
The longest-running live comedy music concert series is almost here.
Everything about this is dumb, and so am I. Here we go.
MarsCon is happening February 28th through March 1st at the Hilton Minneapolis-St. Paul Mall of America, featuring the world-famous Dementia track with performances by the Great Luke Ski, Devo Spice, TD's Kyle and Lynn Zilla, Mikey Mason, Mark with a C, Beth Kinderman and the Player Characters, Cornflake, Brett Glass, Carl Brown, Michael William Hunter, Il Nej, and this year's music guest of honor, Lauren Mayer.
Mom's menopausal with a teen in puberty, not a pretty sight to see. Around here no one talks and we can yell, 'cause we're in hormone hell.
Plus Dementia Water Aerobics and merch at Table 27, Dementia Smackdown Wrestling, and more. Be sure to pick up your copy of the MarsCon 2020 Dementia Track Fundraiser MP3 album with over 4 hours of live music and comedy recorded at MarsCon 2019 for just $20. Visit MarsConDementia.com and click on Shop.
I'm so happy the way that song came out, and I'm absolutely shocked that we put it together in a week and a half.
Registration for a weekend badge is $55 until January 31st, after which the price goes up to $70 at the door. For more info on MarsCon, visit MarsCon.org. Thanks for listening, funny music fans, and
We will see you at MarsCon 2020. Peace.
Woo! Audience, leave.
And there you go.
Boy, that is a great ad.
It is.
So bouncy and lively and just makes you want to go to the con, doesn't it?
Yeah, I might be there. I don't know if you will be there.
Yeah, we're both trying to get there. You're going to be there. I'm doing my best. So if you're in the area and you want to meet us for any reason, we'll be wandering around.
I really want to meet us. So let's get down to business. Wait, that's a different episode.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
So today we are talking about Pocahontas 1995. This is the, again, Alan Menken is doing the music on this one. Also, this is the first movie that Stephen Schwartz did music for. We talked about him with Hunchback. Before we started recording, you said you wanted to talk about something with Stephen Schwartz.
Just a thing that he was talking about in some of my research that I did, where he said that one of his inspirations for the music, as at least the lyrics, is that for the English colonists, he took a lot of inspiration from, like, English sea shanties and English folk songs and stuff of the time, but for the natives in the movie, he took a lot of inspiration from the way that Oscar Hammerstein wrote. Because Hammerstein was known for quite a few productions. He's a Broadway lyricist, if you don't know him. He did a lot of shows that were about the intersection of white European culture and non-white cultures, specifically dealing with people who had been colonized or enslaved or othered in some ways by white culture. Specifically in South Pacific, and also in Showboat, which deals with Showboat has a plot about a mixed race marriage, and so does South Pacific. And if you know Hammerstein's work, go back and listen to the songs of the natives and the way that the lyrics are given to the natives, and you will absolutely start to hear that influence there. And when I read that in the research before doing my rewatch, I was like, oh wow, he is absolutely correct, and I can hear it. So if you're a big Broadway nerd like we are, go back and listen to the soundtrack with that in mind, and you will start to hear that Hammerstein influence in there. I thought that was very neat because I'm a big fan.
So let's get this one little I guess PSA moment out of the way. There is no way we can talk about this movie without getting somewhat political. There's just no way. If you've ever seen the movie, you kind of understand this. So if you have an aversion to political talk in your podcast, sorry, I'm going to apologize because
this is not the podcast you were looking for.
Move along.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, but we're dealing with white colonists on native land. It's still something that is to this day is still an issue. Just look what happened in Dakota not too long ago.
Yeah. And Disney knew what they were doing with this. Please do not think that we are in any way politicizing a movie Disney meant to be apolitical. Disney did not mean this movie to be apolitical. If you look back at how it was created, this was absolutely a move by Disney to clear some of its not so great past. Yeah,
washing some of the blood off their hands.
In a way, they really did want to get away from an all-white cast, which had been the entire history of Disney, pretty much.
We talked about this last week with The Lion King. It's a movie that's completely set in Africa, but you have a mostly white cast.
Yeah. With Pocahontas, they actually did do their best, and you can argue whether or not that was good enough, but they did try. They got actors of native descent. They discussed things like costuming and some of the portrayals of native culture with people from that culture. The animators met with people who claimed, and we'll get into that with the historicity of Pocahontas, but claimed to be descended from the actual Pocahontas herself. So they did try. You can ding them for being kind of white corporate America's
The internet
version.
did not exist in 1995, so they couldn't really fact check.
Yeah.
And another one I was talking about, Aladdin. Again, a movie that took place in an Arab culture, again with mostly white cast, even going as far back as Zorro.
Oh yeah.
Zorro was a movie taking place in Mexican America, early colonizing, but again, mostly white cast of all playing Mexicans.
Yeah.
So again, their attempt, and they would do this again with Pocahontas, with Mulan later, by actually having people of that descent be casted. So they were kind of ahead of the game in terms of casting the trying to find the right word, integrating casting, I guess.
Yeah, and there is a lot to be said that you can still take exception to the way it turned out and the way they did it, but the point is that they were attempting this as a bit of a political move, and they absolutely knew what they were doing and how it would be perceived. So Disney knew what they were doing because they specifically tried to make this a more serious film. And it is, in fact, one of the things that was controversial, I guess, with a lot of reviewers at the time, is that,
This wasn't Disney enough, pretty much.
It wasn't that typical Disney, all the animals are talking, and, it's full of comedy. We do have a little bit with Miko and Flit as comedic characters. We do have the talking tree.
Years before Groot.
Yeah. Groot is a descendant of Grandmother Willow, I'm sure. But, they specifically kept these characters silent in order to, they were dealing with a historical character, a historical figure, even though they really, really kind of went off with the storyline there. But they were trying to treat this with some level of gravitas.
And this is not the first time they've handled a historical figure that Disney has done. They've done, remember the Davy Crockett movies.
Oh, yeah.
And, even before that, an entire park attraction dedicated to Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
So they're not, it's not unfamiliar ground, but it's the first time they've done one with their animated movies. Because, they've done, Pecos Bill and Johnny Appleseed, but those were shorts. This one was a full-on movie.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, the historical nature of some of the characters they dealt with before this was in a lot more doubt, even than Pocahontas. They were very much tall tales. We have a bit more writing from the time on Pocahontas' life.
And even that's subject because John Smith wasn't the most honest man about all this.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from the fact that Pocahontas herself was never really in the historical record allowed to tell her own story. We have a lot of, she met with the king and queen of this nation, or she went and visited the nobility of that area, and then those stories would kind of filter down into the news record of the time, or diarists, or whatever, but you don't really have any, I sat down with Pocahontas and transcribed her story.
So a lot of secondhand information.
Yeah, so a lot of what we know about her life comes from just kind of mentions in historical records of other things happening, but mainly from the men in her life writing about her, and that is quite problematic in that sense. As you said, John Smith was not known to be a very nice, kind man.
He was also not an honest. He had the tendency to embellish a lot. Yeah. And if you see this movie, is he embellished?
Yeah. And even John Rolfe, the circumstances of their meeting was not great, and it is.
Are we going into the sequel already?
Well, no, I mean, I'm just talking about what we know of her life, because a lot of stuff that we know from the John Rolfe years is kind of somewhat worked into this film. It's just not John Rolfe as a character.
Although John Rolfe will become a character in the sequel.
Yeah, he will. I mean, they go into that, but even then, they had to wildly change the circumstances of their meeting. And let's just deal with it now. Pocahontas, as portrayed in this movie, is about 18 or 19. They never really give a definitive age, but they wanted her to be an adult. They wanted her to be seen as an adult woman. Pocahontas, in reality, only lived to about 21.
Yeah, she was early teens, if that, when she met John Smith.
Depending on which writing you take from of John Smith's, he changed the story of her being anywhere from about 10 to about 13 or 14 when they first met. It seems like the lower end of that is probably what actually would have been.
Yeah, Pocahontas was a lot younger than she is in this movie, and John Smith is a lot older than he was in this movie.
When they met, Smith would have been, I think, about 28 to 30, somewhere in that range, and she would have most likely been around 10 years old. Mm-hmm. So, and there is absolutely no historical record of there ever being a romantic relationship. There is a lot of historical documentation for the fact that she was friends with him, that she seemed to like him and spend time around him, but there is...
The most that I've been able to find out, excuse me, is that she saw him more of a father figure than a romantic interest.
Yes, there is some record for that, including by John Smith's own hand, but I will remind you that in Native culture of the time, referring to an older man as father was just a sign of respect. It was like, sir, now. Mm-hmm. So whether or not she saw him in the same way as we would consider a father figure now, or whether or not she used that term just in a cultural way as, you are an older man I respect, is up for debate. Because certainly to John Smith, it probably would have seen that the use of the word father may have indicated a paternal kind of thing there. But we don't know what her version of that was, whether it was just cultural sign of respect or not.
Could just be column A, column B. We don't know, and we never will know.
So what we're saying is that the majority of this movie is fiction from whole cloth, and a lot of it is most likely fiction perpetrated by John Smith at the time.
Yeah. So I mean, again, we talked about the controversies, and basically the big two were it wasn't historically accurate enough, and that it wasn't Disney enough. That seems to be the big two controversies from various people who have reviewed the movie and who've watched the movie.
Yeah. There is some debate about whether, and there was at the time, about whether Pocahontas as a character was more sexualized than previous Disney princesses.
There is a thing that people say that the non-white Disney princesses tend to be more sexualized. I mean, look at Jasmine with the crop top, and you have the way they have Pocahontas look, the way they have Moana look.
Yeah. However, some of those clothing choices, especially with Moana, that's very similar to the cultural clothing styles of South Pacific people. They tried to make sure Pocahontas's costuming was fairly culturally accurate. There is some debate on that because a lot of what we know of Native America's culture prior to colonization is handed down through oral records. And so some of it is a little more difficult to verify according to academic standards of current, modern day society, because we don't have as many written records or like surviving portraiture and things like that. So sometimes there is some, how much of this was influenced by colonizer culture. However, Jasmine's costume is completely inaccurate. The Arab world of the time kept quite extensive records, and we have a lot of things, extant samples from that time period. Jasmine is absolutely not at all culturally accurate to the time period.
And they did try to remedy that with the remake.
Yeah. So
even now, Jasmine's outfit, if you see Jasmine in the Disney parks, her outfit is more culturally appropriate, I guess. Even it's still not, but it's not as, she doesn't have a navel crop top in the parks anymore. It's more closer to the remake, but it's still looking more like the original cartoon.
I haven't visited a Disney park since I was 12, maybe, and so at that time, Jasmine absolutely was portrayed almost entirely by white cast members in a crop top belly genie, in the I Dream of Genie sense.
They have,
outfit.
they have had other non-white people. It's mostly Asian or Hispanic. Let's be honest with that. So it's very rarely to get an actual, mostly because these actors and actresses have to play multiple characters throughout the week.
Yeah.
So the same person who would be playing, for example, the same person who was playing Jasmine on Monday, on Tuesday has to play Moana, on Wednesday has to play Mulan.
Yeah. Maybe hire more diverse cast members to see. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. But so yeah, take everything in this movie with a huge heaping of salt.
A barrel size of salt.
Yeah. They tried, but they didn't always get it right.
Yeah. So do you want to get into the movie?
Absolutely, let's get into the movie.
I watched this on Disney Plus. Did you watch this on Disney Plus?
Absolutely, I did.
All right, so let's go through the Disney Plus version. Classic Blue Castle logo.
Yep.
Did like that. Again,
I was very interested to see that.
Like we talked with Hunchback, this is likely due to the soundtrack starting as soon as the movie starts. As soon as that intro starts, you hear the drums.
Yeah.
The British drum, the opening of our song, the first song, the Virginia Company. London, 1607. That's the first line of the movie is in 1607. They straight up tell you what the year is. Although technically it should be 1606 or 1605, depending on the length of the boat trip, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So many men are signing up to head to the New World. You see many men saying goodbye to their loved ones, including a young man named Thomas, voiced by Christian Bale. Christian Bale's in this movie?
You had forgotten Christian Bale was in this movie, didn't you?
I did.
I did as well.
I'm also one of the people that forget that Christian Bale's British.
I do not. I've seen him in enough. The thing is, though, is that, of course, this was not his first kind of foray into Disney, was it?
don't know.
But,
yeah.
Newsies was in fact before
Newsies,
this,
I forgot
and a Disney film. I wanted to make sure that the time period there, but he Newsies was in '92, so he would have already had some familiarity with a Disney musical, just not an animated one.
Yeah. So, but he's not talking like the Batman. We have to get the Pocahontas, John Smith. Anyway, so we see Thomas with his mother, father, and younger sister. In a very cute moment, the younger sister puts the father's hat on Thomas's head that he would wear for the rest of the film. Thomas is a fictional character. There might have been a Thomas, but probably not this particular Thomas.
Yeah.
So, enter Captain John Smith, played by Mel Gibson. Yeah, there's lots to say about Mel Gibson. Let's not.
All I'm going to say is that the historical John Smith was described by people who knew him as being very brash, very rude, authoritarian in his outlook on life, a bit of a white supremacist, as you might imagine, for a colonizer of early America. Basically, Mel Gibson was perfectly cast for this. Unfortunately, they went with Mel Gibson's public persona in 1993 or whenever they were creating it.
Well, Mel Gibson at least gets to do more of a closer to his natural accent than his regular American accent you would see in like Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, and Mel Gibson's accent, just to get a little linguistic here, has changed massively just in his kind of everyday speaking voice. He has lost a lot of the Australian accent because he has lived in America for the majority of his life now. So while it is still there, his accent just in his daily speech has Americanized quite heavily, because that's just what happens when you come to a different country at a relatively youngish age and spend the majority of your life there.
I mean, sort of like Nicole Kidman in a way.
Nicole Kidman has retained more of her Australian accent because she constantly goes back and spends a lot of her time there, and then of course recently did marry an Australian who has a thick Australian accent himself. So she's around that more often. Mel Gibson seems to spend most of his time in America around Americans, so that it makes a difference.
So yeah, John Smith knows how to make an entrance riding that cannon onto the ship. Cannon that goes boom, boom, not cannon my co-host.
As I tell my students, I am not the shooty thing that scares off pirates. Yeah, so I want to talk about this opening song.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are the type of person who came into this podcast thinking, okay, these two chuckleheads are trying to politicize a non-political film, this is like the most political song in Disney history up to that point.
They're singing of the glory of a corporation.
They are singing of the glory of a corporation, which is, in line for Disney, but they are specifically talking about their desire to go over there, to remove the native people, to take their land, to take their gold, to take any resources they have, and claim it as their own.
In the name of the Virginia Company.
Yeah.
Glory, God, and gold, glory, and the gold, God, and the glory of the Virginia Company. That is the lyric. That is an actual lyric in the song. I know, because I was watching this movie with subtitles to make sure I was getting it right.
Yeah. But it even undercuts it as that these people are there for the wrong reason. Right there at the beginning of the song, it says, "We'll all be rich and free," or so we have been told by the Virginia Company. It's already undercutting the great glory of this enterprise. You have been lied to. Even the colonizers have been lied to. Most of the men on this boat, in the actual, historical fact of the thing, most of these sailors would not have really seen a share of any of the plunder the Virginia Company took. They would have gotten a decent but relatively small salary in relation to the amount of profit the company would have made. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar. Things haven't changed much in 400 and something years. But Schwartz knew what he was doing with these lyrics, and Disney signed off on all these lyrics knowing what they were doing. So, so if you missed it when you were a kid, I'm sorry, but it's always been there.
Yeah, so let's enter, I guess you can call him our villain, Governor John Radcliffe, played by David Ogden Stiers. Now, John Radcliffe was a real person. He wasn't as involved with all of this as the movie has him be involved in, and he likely died midway through the events of this story.
And I will not get into it because you can Google it yourself. Ratcliffe had an end that is definitely not fit for any Disney movie. Mm-hmm. Wow. That is nightmare-inducing. All I'm going to say. I think the reason they chose Ratcliffe as opposed to one of the other governors in Jamestown was because his name was Ratcliffe. I'm just going to go with that.
That sounds
theory.
like a villain name right there.
Yeah.
So we meet Radcliffe's manservant, Wiggins, also played by David Ogden Stiers. So at some point, he's talking to himself a lot of this movie.
Yeah, and singing to himself. There is a duet between himself and himself.
And Radcliffe's pet pug, Percy. Say that 5 times fast.
Pet pug, Percy, pet pug, Percy, pet pug. No, can't do it.
Percy played by Danny Mann. Things go south pretty quickly in this trip as the ship is caught in a storm. And I love that transition. They look up and there's the Union Jack all bright and sunny and crash of lightning and then it's all tore up.
I am going to say that I appreciate what Triton did to try to prevent the colonizers from making it to the American shores. I wish he had been more successful. But that was all I thought of rewatching this. I was like, Triton knew what was up.
Triton doesn't trust the humans. So the ship is taking on water because it's a storm. And Thomas is knocked overboard. And in a this is another one of those, John Smith wrote himself to be the hero. Smith takes a rope that was tying down the sails, jumps into the water, saves Thomas. Very, very, John Smith is the hero of this story moment.
Yeah.
And, the other crew pulls him in and he does the big, oh, you would have done the same for me. Oh, yeah, sure, buddy. Yeah, John, you would have done the same thing. Yeah. And even, not even 5 seconds before, they would said, he's lost, leave him alone, Thomas is dead, keep going.
Yeah. We need to bring up a little something about John Smith's character that is talked a lot about in dialogue, but is not really shown in the movie.
Go ahead.
Is that this is, according to the movie, not John Smith's first trip to the Americas. And that John Smith is on this voyage because he has a reputation for killing natives rather ruthlessly.
Well, they say this is not his first new world, not trip to this particular new world.
Oh, yeah, you are correct because he does mention about how they've civilized other savages to Pocahontas later. But basically, John Smith is there because he is very good at exterminating the unwanted population of a new place. And they talk about that, but they don't really show it in his actions in the movie, and I'm not really a fan of that. If you're gonna go there, Disney, go there. You don't have to go dark with it, but at least show him being more racist or more caught
Have him
up in
be a
his own
jerk.
superior. Yeah, have him be a jerk. They were so invested in making him the lovable Disney prince ideal that they kind of undercut their own story here, and I'm not down with that, Disney.
Yeah.
Nope.
So after Thomas is saved, Governor Radcliffe gives the crew a pep talk about freedom in the new world, freedom, money, blah 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 blah. But it's all a ruse, as Radcliffe plans to use the crew to dig up gold for himself. Yeah, Ratcliffe.
Yeah.
So the crew goes on about how excited they are about killing natives. Yeah. Lyric is straight up saying, "I'll kill myself an Indian or maybe 2 or 3."
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to be using the term Indian or Indian a lot. I'm going to try to avoid that, but since it said that way in this particular scene, we're going to go with that one time.
Yeah.
So Thomas and John wonder about the new world. John, a seasoned traveler, wonder what makes this new world so special. What's so special about this new world that all the other new worlds I've seen was different? We don't know. And that's the opening. 5.5 minutes. Not bad. And we transition straight into our next song, Steady as the Beating Drum. Because in the new world, we see the Powhatan people. Some are farming, some are fishing, but all pay attention as warriors return from combat along with their leader, Chief Powhatan, played by Russell Means, with singing voice by Jim Cummings.
Yay!
That I can excuse of having a singing voice for this character. Like we talked about before, sometimes you get the actor in the studio to sing and maybe they're not as strong as Disney would like them to be. So get a seasoned vet like Jim Cummings.
Yeah.
He is greeted by the shaman Kekata, played by Gordon Titutis, also singing voice by Jim Cummings.
Yeah.
So we're getting David Sears talking and singing to himself, and Jim Cummings singing to himself.
Yes. The only thing I'll kind of ding Jim Cummings for on this one is that if you listen, these are the only thing I could think of with the Chief's singing voice was this sort of sounds like Winnie the Pooh had a bad day. It's very similar to his kind of Winnie the Pooh voice.
Maybe it's my hearing, but I really didn't hear much of a difference between the two singing voices.
There's not much, and they're much closer to Jim Cummings' normal speaking voice. Mm-hmm. I think the Chief has like kind of weird shades of what he would later do with Winnie the Pooh. But yeah, they are very, very similar in performance. And I'm not used to that from Jim Cummings. We've talked before about what an amazing kind of mimic he can be, how he changes up his voice dramatically for different parts. This wasn't it. This was a bad day.
Maybe that's just the direction he was given.
Yeah, it could be down to the direction, absolutely.
So they have defeated the Mesowomics and protected their village, but the chief doesn't, he's happy to see all of the people there welcoming him home, but doesn't see the one face he really wants to see, his daughter Pocahontas. So Pocahontas, Irene Better, singing voiced by Judy Kunn, is with her friends, a hummingbird named Flick. Frank Welker! Hey, how you doing, Frank?
Woohoo! Frank Welker!
And a raccoon named Miko, played by John Kassir. Raccoon and a talking tree in the Disney movie. It won't work.
Yeah. John, let's just give a couple of words about John Kassir, because I think this is the first time we've talked about him.
Mm-hmm.
John Kassir, you better know him as the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt.
Yes.
Yes. John, I love me some John Kassir. He's also, oh my goodness. He's one of those voice actors that is in everything. He's also a live action actor as well. And, which is a little strange for a voice actor of that much note to also have a pretty a pretty broad-reaching live action on camera career as well. But he is a really good, really versatile actor, but he does a lot of the kind of background characters a lot of times, although he has on several kind of infamous occasions taken over for a previous voice actor in a major role. He actually took over for Alan Young as Scrooge McDuck at one point. And he has done some of the Buster Bunny voice when Charlie Adler was not available. So he is that versatile, to do Buster Bunny and Scrooge McDuck and stand in for such kind of diverse actors. Unfortunately, because of the way this movie was done, John Kessier is doing Frank Welker's normal kind of random animal noise thing here.
I don't know. To me, having John Kessier play Miko is the equivalent of having Alan Tudyk play a chicken.
Which, I mean, okay, there was precedent for that. I concede that fact, Disney. You keep doing you crazy diamond.
So anyway, so they get the word from Pocahontas' one human friend, Nakoma, played by Michelle St. John, that her father has returned. Since she's on the cliff, she just jumps off it. Why not? And makes a gold medal dive into the water, splashless landing. Judges give it a 10.
Yeah, it is kind of a, if you want to set the character up as kind of reckless and go in her own way, I guess that's as good a way as any that Disney has come up with.
The fact that they made it look like an Olympic dive, and again with no splash, it was beautifully animated, but it's more of a one of those blink and you miss it modern references.
Yeah.
So there's a little horseplay going around between Pocahontas and Nakoma as the kind of Pocahontas tips over the boat and they kind of horse around underneath the boat. We find out that Pocahontas has been having a recurring odd dream, and that she was on the cliff to figure out what that dream meant. Back to the village, the chief tells of the all-day battle with the Mesonomics, and how the bravest warrior of all was Kocoum, played by James Fall, although Kocoum doesn't talk a lot in this movie. Yeah, Nakoma is really into Kocoum, but Pocahontas isn't. He's so serious. That's a recurring gag in this movie, of how serious Kocoum is. The guy didn't smile at all in this whole movie.
Yeah. There are some things in the historical record that suggest that Pocahontas had a first husband prior to Rolfe. Mm-hmm. We don't actually know that Kocoum existed, is the problem. Kocoum, the name kind of does appear here and there related to some things, but it's a little confusing as to where that comes from. Some legends claim that she had children with Kocoum and that there are descendants from that union, but really there's not a lot of historical backing to suggest that she really did, or like I said, that he even existed. So it's interesting to see him put in here as her intended husband that never happened.
So Pocahontas tells her father about the strange dream and how something exciting is about to happen. Her father tells her something is exciting to happen, and like Kiki said, Kocoum has asked the chief for Pocahontas' hand in marriage. She's not into Kocoum at all. She does not want to marry Kocoum at all and wants to make her own choice. some little horseplay with Miko and Flick later. We enter our next song, Steady as the Beatings of Reprise, sung by the Chief, Jim Cummings. As the Chief tells Pocahontas to be steady like the river, and that take the best path, it's a steady path. And gives Pocahontas the necklace that her mother wore. Keep that in mind. That becomes important later. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, leads into the next one, our next song. This is just song after song here. The big song, our I Want song of the movie, Just Around the Riverbend.
A song that was almost cut.
Yeah.
That they didn't really feel that it had the power of a typical I Want song. I disagree. I think it's a perfectly serviceable Disney song. There are some interesting lyrical choices.
But the gist of it is the river isn't steady. The river is always flowing. She's a free spirit full of pure... Take two. She's a free spirit full of curiosity and adventure. And if she marries Kocoum, that's done. Yeah. That's kind of it. And I think everybody goes through that at one point or another in their life. There's the path you want to go on and the path you have to go on. And those are two different ways, and you have to choose which one you want to go down.
Yeah, there are a couple of lines in this song that seem to call back to a deleted scene. One is that she talks about how in order to get safety, humans give up the ability to know what's just around the river bend. And the other one is she talks about, does she want a strong and sturdy husband who builds strong and sturdy walls or something like that? And both of these, and this scene is on Disney Plus if you want to go see it, there is a scene where Kocoum talks about how their marriage is going to be, and he talks about how he wants Pocahontas near him because how can I protect my wife if I don't know where she is? And his entire scene seems to be about wanting to keep her safe, protected within the village, within the walls of the home and whatever. So I find it interesting that they cut that scene, but they left in the sentiment, which kind of, I don't know, it doesn't have as much impact for me, minus that scene. We get, he's so serious. Yeah, that's kind of all we get as Pocahontas's reasoning for not being attracted to him. But I think the deleted scene shows it more, that it's because he's overprotective and he wants to dictate where she goes and what she does and where she is at all time.
All we get is this stern, steady man standing perfectly still while these children play around him. And I guess that was supposed to indicate something, that, maybe Pocahontas wants children and doesn't see him as a good potential father. That's what I got out of that scene.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. But I think the deleted scene maybe should have been reworked in some way. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know.
Anyway, so Pocahontas, after her song is done, goes through a veil of vines, and we meet Grandmother Willow, played by Linda Hunt. Linda Hunt, probably known more today in her role of NCIS. But yes. This was I think her first run with Disney. I'm not sure. But
yeah.
Anyway, so we have a talking tree named Grandmother Willow. And Pocahontas tells Grandmother Willow about her dream, a spinning arrow that spins faster and faster and suddenly stops. Then Pocahontas talks of marrying Kocoum. She doesn't know what to do. Even Grandmother Willow is against Kocoum. Like, he's so serious. That's all we know about Kocoum in the body of the film itself, is that he's serious. And apparently everybody knows this. And, even the tree doesn't want Pocahontas to marry Kocoum.
Yeah. I mean, when a tree is against your marriage, what can you do?
Flick seems to like Kocoum, though. Not sure.
I think that Flick is the one that wants safety. I think that's supposed to be the idea there, is that Flit is scared, he wants safety. Here's Kocoum, who is kind of big and strong. He's a known entity, fine. Flit does not seem to do good with
strangers. That's the reason they give the movie.
She says strangers in the movie, but if you look at kind of the characterization entirely, he doesn't like new things at all.
Mm-hmm.
Is that and that's constantly the dichotomy between Miko and Flit, I guess, is that Miko's like, oh, look, a new thing, maybe it will have food. And Flit's like, no, not the new thing. I don't want to do the new thing, thanks.
Yeah. So let's go to our next song, Listen with Your Heart. You will understand. Listen to the spirits that are around you, child. They tell Pocahontas of strange clouds. She goes to sea, and it's the sails of the Virginia Company ship, the Strange Clouds. The song itself is pretty short. It's okay.
Very exposition.
Yes, very exposition. It's just... we need this song to get us to them speaking the same language later in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got stuff on
We'll
that.
get to it.
So let's transition back to the ship, where Radcliffe sees the New World as a land full of gold. John Smith says the crew is ready to go to shore and needs to do so. We find out that Radcliffe isn't a very popular guy back in London, and sees this trip as his last chance to pretty much make something of himself in the hierarchy of London. So we have reason for his greed. It's still greed, but we have reason for his greed.
Well, his greed comes from a different sort of greed. His monetary greed comes from his social greed.
Yes.
Because his servant does say that people say that he's like an unapologetic social climber, and you see in the course of his song that he wants to be, knighted. No, I'll be a lord. I'll be, the king's best friend. He wants that fame and social power, and I think the gold is really just a way to get there.
He's gonna buy himself in.
Yeah.
So John takes a few men in the rowboat to land, and they bring the big ship in. Apparently the water's enough so they could bring the entire big ship into the mainland. I'm not sure how that works, but it's a cartoon.
It's possible in some places. Whether it's possible in that particular part of Virginia, I don't know.
Yeah, all while Pocahontas watches. Then Miko meets John, and Miko likes him after giving him a biscuit. Gotta say a lot about the food in this area if a biscuit is gonna really make you his friend.
That's not even a biscuit in either the British or the American sense. What that would have been historically is hardtack, which was flour and water mixed together, baked a little bit, and then the reason it was used on ships is because it kept basically indefinitely. And the reason it kept indefinitely is because it had no liquid whatsoever and was hard as a rock, hence hardtack.
They actually do mention hardtack and gruel later in the film.
Yeah, the way to eat hardtack, it can't really be done easily with human teeth. You'd have to have some really strong chompers. What you did was you soaked it in your porridge or your gruel or your whatever, and you waited for it to absorb enough water to kind of become a mush. It was not pleasant, but it would theoretically sustain a human body to some extent across an ocean voyage.
Well, they say 4 months at sea, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a shorter trip by this point, but still a pretty hard trip. So yeah, I think one of the kind of subtle jokes that most people don't get in this movie is that Miko will eat literally anything, including hardtack that hasn't even been softened.
So yeah, and Miko kind of looks back at Pocahontas, and John almost finds Pocahontas, but Flit does chase him away because Flit doesn't like anything new anyway.
Good Flit. We like Flit.
So back at the Politan village, Kakata shows what the new pale visitors are like. Men who have weapons that shoot fire, consuming all in their path like wolves. He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Is this when we get the infamous line? This scene? I can't remember. No, it's later.
No.
All right, we'll get to the infamous line. Moving on.
The meme comes later. The Coquitlam wants to fight the invaders, but the chief wants to know more about them first, which is a good military strategy. Know your enemy. Because, you go in there chasing, you don't know what you're fighting.
And the military strategy is his reasoning in this. He says, we don't know how to fight these particular people.
Invaders. They do say the word invaders, which is true. This is true. They have
different weapons. They have armor that has never been seen in this area before. Okay, that's
bodies
fine.
that shine like the sun is what they say. And
which honestly, as a kid, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good definition of pale white people, because I've been on the beach with a bunch of pale white people at the beginning of summer. That's pretty much how we look. At the beginning of summer, go out to the beaches of Georgia with all of the gleaming people. There's that comic about the white girl on the beach, and someone starts screaming, the fires of Gondor are lit, Gondor comes for aid. That is very much what it's like.
So back at shore, Radcliffe claims the land and names it Jamestown after King James I. Jamestown, Virginia, still there. Miko wanders on the ship and messes with Percy, starting a rivalry that goes through the rest of the film. Miko becomes the bane of Percy's existence.
Which is fine. I mean, Percy is the spoiled rich kid in this scenario. He needed something to shake up his worldview.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's the most interesting dynamic in the film to me. It's when I am most interested in the screen is when those two are on screen.
I think this is one of those, this is definitely for the kids moments. And again, I made my thing known about these just the kids moments. I was already too old at this point.
Yeah, we would have been just about to enter high school.
Yeah.
When this movie came out. We would have been like in the summer before high school.
Yep. So, I mean, I get why it's there. I understand why it's there, but it's at that point, even today, it's not something that, it's not for me. And I get that it's for someone else. I get that.
It's for me. I'm perfectly fine with these scenes. They annoy me less than some of the scenes in The Lion King, for instance.
Not as annoying as the gargoyles.
Oh, definitely nothing is as annoying as the gargoyles, I fear.
So, getting back here, John goes out to see how close the Palatins are. Scan the perimeter, see how close they are. And, meanwhile, Radcliffe puts the men to work, which goes into our next song, Mine, Mine, Mine. The whole song, there's a lot of clever wordplay in this song that works in English. I don't know how his wordplay works in other languages. Because you have the word mine has more than one meaning. Mining as mining for gold, and mine as it belongs to me. So yeah. I don't know how that wordplay works in other languages.
Mostly it doesn't.
Yeah.
They would have just had the single meaning, and then it would have been, some lyrics to prove how greedy it was later.
Yeah,
Translation of songs, and especially wordplay, is such a fraught problem.
It's like you hear a song in one language, and a lot of people love it. Oh, it's a great wordplay, and then you translate it into, even translating from a foreign language into English, a lot of the meaning is lost.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
anyway, Radcliffe, like we said before, Radcliffe plans to make everyone at the court back home jealous with the gold he finds. Again, buying his way up the social ladder. Meanwhile, John dreams of adventures he'll have in the new world, a land he can claim, a land he can tame. So they both have different. The song is supposed to show you the different mindsets that Radcliffe and John Smith have. In that Radcliffe wants money so he can buy his own social status, and John just wants the glory of adventure. That.
But
Go ahead.
yeah. um. No. I know Disney kind of portrays it as the glory of adventure, but that like a land I can tame and stuff like that. I mean, it's absolutely back to John Smith is still in a colonizer mindset here.
This land is. There's nothing in this land. This land belongs to me.
Yeah, I know they try to draw a distinction between look how awful Ratcliffe is and look how much more noble John Smith is, but no, both of these are not at all noble desires the way they are portrayed. So yeah, I'm not down with the kind of way this song tries to set them up as rivals. I'm still not down with rooting for John Smith at this point in the movie. This song, though, I will say, has the most chorus, I guess, motif.
Dig.
Yeah, it's. I do not like that. I love Stephen Schwartz. He's an amazing lyricist. No.
Not his best work.
not your best day. I'm sorry, man. You've done so much better.
I do like we talked about it before that King John's gonna be his best friend. How he calls King James. Yeah, sorry, King John is a different movie.
Yeah.
So King James, he calls him King Jimmy in the song. My best friend King Jimmy.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anyone called him King Jimmy back in the day. He would have had you killed for it.
Yeah, during this time, calling the king by any sort of nickname would probably have been treasonous, in some sense. But yeah,
And
his desire. I don't know. I think his desire for the kind of social climb is presented here as like, well, I mean, wanting gold is fine, but wanting to be a social climber, which is a kind of I hate to say it, but it's a kind of a snooty rich person's idea of what's good and bad.
yeah,
Like,
stay in your station, Radcliffe.
yeah, I mean, desiring money, we can understand that, but wanting to climb the social ladder without leave, clutching pearls, yeah.
Oh, and of course, this is the song where David Ogden Stier sings to himself. He has a duet with himself.
But I give him credit for the voice acting on this because these are two wildly different voices, and for the longest time I didn't know he did both.
Yeah.
So, good for him.
Especially, Radcliffe has a very deep voice and Wiggins has a very high voice.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the film. John rests by the river, washing his face, and notices that he's being followed. It is Pocahontas. John readies his gun, but stops when he sees her. He is mesmerized by her. So apparently this is the reason he didn't kill Pocahontas, was because she is so beautiful that he's never seen a woman so beautiful in his life.
And boy, do they linger on this. It was uncomfortable watching this again, frankly. I don't know how you felt about it, but everything about the framing of this and the way her head turns so regally and the wind whips I mean, it was the scene in those like raunchy 80s teen sex comedies where the hot chick comes into the room and like everything goes into slow motion and there's like a wind machine and fog for no reason.
And there was a wind machine. Her hair's blowing in the wind here.
Well, yeah, and it's slightly more understandable that there's wind and fog because she is standing in a waterfall basically at this point, but it's so cheesy and so... I think when people talk about Pocahontas being overly sexualized, this is one of the things they could point to with good reason.
Yeah.
Because just the way that she stands, she doesn't say anything to him. She just stands there as like a pretty object that he gapes at for an uncomfortably long amount of time.
Yep. Anyway, she doesn't stick around very long because she's out of there. And John gets chased. Eventually, he catches up to her, and he finds out that they don't speak the same language. Though he does offer his hand out to her. And this is where we get the reprise of Listen With Your Heart. And Pocahontas magically understands English.
And apparently transfers this power to everyone in her tribe. Because later in the movie, they seem to understand English just fine.
Because that's how languages work, right?
Yeah, that as a linguist can confirm, languages are transmitted by magical, weird, glowing gold shapes in the wind. I still don't know what those things are supposed to be, but boy, they irk me.
All you have to do is listen to your heart, and you will understand every language. That's how it works, right?
If that worked, I would speak every language on the planet, because that is one of my biggest dreams. If I could have one superpower, it would absolutely be to understand any form of language.
Nope,
doesn't work that way.
Go watch Noelle on Disney Plus.
No, because I don't watch Christmas movies unless you make me for this podcast.
Oh, okay. Wait
your turn, Christmas.
So Pocahontas now understands English. My name is Pocahontas and all that. Back at Jamestown, the Powhatans are looking in at the Englishmen as the Englishmen continue to dig. But they are discovered when, of all things, Wiggins throws a chicken leg at them. So this is all Wiggins' fault.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Chicken leg.
Like the guy just stands up after getting thrown a chicken leg. It's like it's an odd reaction to it. But again, having never seen a chicken leg.
Well, it's very obviously food, though.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you've never seen a chicken leg, like maybe he thought that was their way of like giving a gift. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, the Radcliffe says it's an ambush, and Englishmen start shooting at the Powhatans. One gets shot in the leg, forcing the retreat. And the Englishmen celebrate, "Yay, we shot a native!" And I think Radcliffe kind of shuts that down. Is like hey, we need to get the fort built. We need to get everything up because they're coming to kill us in his own little mind.
They know we're here now.
Yeah, they know we're here. We know they're there.
Yeah. And also, we just shot one of them unprovoked, so...
Yeah. So, back at the Powhatan village, they've never seen a wound like this before because they've never seen guns before. The chief says that no one should go near these settlers. And then we get the meme. These white men are dangerous.
The most true line ever written by Disney, I feel.
Yep.
At least in that specific context. Yeah. I know that this is skipping ahead slightly, but I know that this film tries to portray the, we should just talk to each other and all live together in peace. But Imagine that
film.
some dude just broke into your house and starts going, all of this stuff is mine and I live here now. And you're like, no, dude, get out of my house. This is my house. And everybody else goes, but shouldn't you just welcome the greedy crazy man into your house and, just learn to get along with him. Give him his own room. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And that's even before he gives you the smallpox blanket. So,
that scene was cut out of this movie, I think.
Would that it had been cut from history.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what Disney is trying to do, and there is always, I am very much for peaceful coexistence, don't get me wrong. But I do not feel, they try to show the natives as like the better people later on, But this is a one-sided, thing here. There is one side is clearly doing a bad thing, and the other side, you can make a case that they are correct to respond. I know, yes, it's a Disney film, it's a, whatever. But I don't know. That kind of point irks me in a way.
Yeah. So back to the movie. So Pocahontas and John are talking about each other's cultures. They talk how weird words they have for other things and weird names. And looking for food, Miko steals John's compass. This becomes very important later in the movie. John says the compass will always guide you when you're lost. Okay, it's not an exact description of what a compass does, but if you want to break it down to being simple, sure.
Yeah.
And then John puts his foot in his mouth when he puts down the way the Powhatans live and calls them savages and how they civilize other savages in other worlds. Pocahontas doesn't like this guy calling her people savages. She doesn't like this. It's like, our houses are fine. Our way of life is fine. There's nothing wrong with the way our people are. And that is justifiable. Like, if someone came up to, honestly, not just you, Kiki, but the listener, someone came up to you and saying, the way you're living your life is wrong, let me teach you how to live your life the right way, you'd get offended.
Yeah. And the idea of you only think that because you don't know better yet.
Yes.
This is the one scene in the movie where I think they portray John Smith kind of accurately, not only to what we know of the historical John Smith, but just the idea that came along with the colonizers when they landed. Not just in the Americas, but, when British colonizers landed anywhere on the planet. This is, I think, something they should have
done more with.
Yeah, they should have done more with this. I'm gonna go there. This should have been John Smith's character arc. John Smith doesn't really get a character arc. He goes from this scene to like, oh, you're right. Your people are fine as they are, I guess, and I will save them. And there is absolutely no growth. There's, other than the fact that the pretty girl is leaving and he doesn't want the pretty girl to leave, there's really nothing that shows him he's wrong other than the song.
Yes, we go into the song. Apparently all of this is settled away in the next song, Colors of the Wind. This scene, much like The Lion King, was the trailer.
Yeah, and you want to talk about Let It Go recently as a cultural phenomenon that you could not escape. I will remind you, if you were too young to remember, then I'll tell you straight out, but for those of you who are at least our age, this song was inescapable in 1995.
Yeah, again, the trailer was everywhere. The trailer was played on television. Every movie had this trailer attached to it. It was on every Disney VHS.
But not
Uh,
just the trailer. As soon as the movie came out,
the
of
Vanessa
course
Williams version was
the pop song version, the Vanessa Williams version was on the radio at least once an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You could not go anywhere without hearing this, especially if it was a place that was meant to be family friendly.
Yeah.
You know, if you went to like a family dining restaurant or something, this song was the bane of your existence after about a month.
But looking at the way the scene was done, the way the scene was animated, the way the scene was drawn, if you were going to take any one scene of this film and make it the trailer, it would be this scene.
Yeah, the animation, we haven't really talked about the animation in this film yet, but the animation is gorgeous.
Well,
it really is.
We talked about this before. This had Disney's top animators working on this. This was the A team. Like we talked about before, Lion King was the B team. This was
and
the
still
A team.
Gorgeous. I mean, bravo to the B team for the Lion King.
Yeah.
But this movie is visually beautiful, especially when they do things with, I mean,
the watercolor part with
Pocahontas. Yeah, the watercolor part. But honestly, when I dare you to get a group of animators in and go, your big animation thing and thematic thing that you have to do is going to be wind. I'm surprised they didn't like revolt and kill the entire creative team at that point. Like, how do you animate wind as a character almost? You know, the wind is it's not quite fully personified, but it is given the idea that it has a spirit and a mind of its own, and it has
we wouldn't personify wind until Frozen 2.
Yeah, and and the same thing there, and they did beautifully with the animation in that, although that was computer animation. Mm-hmm. But I mean, telling someone like, here, animate a thing that you can't see as its own character has got to have been like, that had to have caused panic attacks in the animation room.
But they make it work so well in this one scene.
Yeah, and it is beautiful. Everything about this scene is animated beautifully, and honestly, it is a catchy song, even though I got sick of hearing it very quickly, but that's not the fault of the writers, of course. There is a bit of issue that could possibly be taken with the portrayal of Native culture and all here. It is true that most, Native culture is not a monolith. Let's just put that there. There were hundreds and hundreds of tribes with their own unique cultures that were in the Americas prior to colonization. Mm-hmm. It is not one thing, not all natives are like, oh, they're all dream catchers and teepees and totem poles. Like, no, those are from 3 different cultures. But there is kind of a bit more of a natural world focus and a respect for the land.
Yeah.
In a lot of Native cultures. I'm no expert at all on what the Powhatan Algonquin kind of culture would have been, of course. But the thing is that this is also a thing that was just very common in Europe before Christianity as well. I'm just going to say a lot of what we would now call, pagan or heathen belief systems had a very similar respect for nature. But we have kind of forgotten that, and so now, especially when white people are doing the writing, it's these like, oh, look at these enlightened natives with their, great respect for the planet and stuff. And it's partially true, but not to the point where we elevate it. And I think that, unfortunately, this song elevates it a little past what it should in some ways and kind of skirts a line there.
Yeah.
But
I get what they're trying to do here. They're trying to. It's Pocahontas trying to teach John that there's more to life than the way he's been living it. That's the general message.
Yeah, there is more to the earth than what you can exploit from it, which I do think is an excellent idea that needs to be taught more, especially in our society.
My favorite line is the one towards the end of the song. Is if you own the earth, all you own is earth.
Yeah. Which, I really do respect what they are trying to say with the song, and I think that they mostly got there, but I think there are still some kind of hanging on problematic aspects to the way that not only in this song but just in the movie that the kind of native culture is portrayed. But then again, that is just my view as an outsider, but it is a view that I have heard said by people who are of that culture as well.
They tried.
So
That's all we can really say.
Well, yeah, they did try, and I want to give them credit for trying because I want them to try more.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know, but I wouldn't doubt that talks of a remake has come up in Disney. I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I hope they don't, honestly. If they refrain from remaking any movie, I really hope it's this one.
There are other films based off Pocahontas and this whole timeline made by other studios. Watch those movies.
Yeah.
So
all right.
let's get back to the film. Days later, Radcliffe is frustrated. No gold has been found. Where's all this gold? We've been told there's gold in this land. Earlier in the movie, the Spaniards found gold in this land. Where is it? And he comes up with this knowledge that maybe the natives, the Powhatans, they have all the gold, and we're gonna go there and we're gonna get the gold from them. How he comes up to this decision, I don't know. He's crazy at this point. And he sends for Captain Smith, but Smith has run off. Meanwhile, Pocahontas and Nakoma are picking corn for the warriors as the chief has sent for warriors of other tribes to come and fight the White Devils. As they actually say this in the movie. I'm quoting the movie. Before any of you say something, they actually say White Devils in the movie.
They do indeed.
So when John arrives in this cornfield, Pocahontas ushers him away while Nakoma covers for her. Nakoma is just in this really bad position this entire movie, in that she is the best friend that has to cover for her friend's trouble throughout the entire film. And it's very clear that she's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. And honestly, I've been that friend before, and it is exhausting. So, I feel for her.
Yeah, especially, she has to lie to Coquelin, the guy that, honestly, she kind of likes. So Pocahontas and John end up by Grandmother Willow, and John tells her about the search for gold. Pocahontas has never seen any gold, even giving him the corn when he said it's yellow and is in the ground. That's
and very valuable.
And very valuable, yes.
Yeah.
So the entire trip
what could be more valuable than your staple grain?
Food.
Yeah. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
To most people in the world, food becomes the most valuable thing when you need it.
Before money, people were trading goods.
Yeah.
So John pretty much says the entire trip was for nothing. They're gonna love this. His crewmates, the governor's gonna love the idea that we traveled for 4 months on the water for nothing.
Yeah. The interesting thing is historically, Pocahontas's husband, John Rolfe, was one of the people who kind of introduced tobacco as a cash crop. So, yeah, it's They didn't find gold, but they found something that made them probably more money than just straight up gold would have.
Again, corn. Corn getting.
Well, yeah, and
it.
corn. Yeah, as a medieval reenactor, I can tell you we do not really ever have corn dishes or corn meal at our events, at our feasts. Corn, tomatoes, potatoes, staples of the American diet that are never really found at a medieval reenactment feast. So if those are your favorite foods, you will not typically find them there.
The Renaissance Fair lied to me.
Oh, yes. Yes, it did.
Anyway.
Turkey legs, too. Also, turkey, American food, not a thing the Europeans would have known about in that time period.
So Grandmother Willow makes herself known to John. She likes him.
Grandmother Willow has horrible taste.
Well, because he calls him handsome, and then automatically John says, "Oh, I like her."
Yeah.
So then John's crewmates come looking for him, and Grandma Willow is able to chase them off, because apparently she can move freely with her roots and all that, because magic and stuff.
Yeah, interestingly, this is the only time in Pocahontas that I saw something that I really went, that's got to be computer generated.
Oh yeah, the bark of the roots and all that.
Yeah, the way that she moves this, and when she's moving John Smith around on her branches and stuff, her branches kind of roll instead of move like a tree ever would, even a willow. And that's the only time that I was like, oh yeah, that just reeks of CGI right there, because it doesn't blend as well as you would hope. It's not horrible. There are definitely worse. Some of the bits in Aladdin don't hold up as well. But this one did not hold up as well.
They work better. They work the shading a bit better here. It
Yeah.
kind of fits a bit more. So anyway, John is off to return to camp because, hey, they're looking for him. He better get back to camp. He wants to see Pocahontas again, and they plan to meet again at Grandmother Willow the next night. So at the village, the warriors have come. As Chief Powhatan meets with the other chiefs, I can get this. Pocahontas tries to avoid war by asking if the chief would listen to one of the white men if they wanted to talk. The chief says he would, but things aren't that simple anymore. Which, cold, but factual.
Yeah.
It's kind of another sign of more modern that, why don't we just talk to each other and avoid this from happening? Yeah, we would talk to them, but it's not that simple anymore. At Jamestown, John returns. Radcliffe plans to kill all the natives, all the Powhatans, and take the gold they have. John says there is no gold. He says, they have this. They have, Miko gives him the ear of corn. He says, here, it's food. We can learn from them. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure the factual John Smith did not do this, but they got to make John look like a good guy in the movie.
Yeah.
Radcliffe doesn't want to hear it, and says anyone who doesn't kill one on sight is a traitor. That is a bit of an overstatement there, Radcliffe, but especially him going, this is, I didn't have it in my notes, but it says, it's, John goes, this is their land, we're on it. And he goes, it's my land, I make the rules. So Radcliffe is completely lost it. He is completely drunk on power here. Yeah, so really all I can say on that one. He's letting his role of governor go to his head.
And honestly, I think that he already had that mindset before he got there.
Probably.
He knew there were people there.
Yeah.
I mean, from the beginning, they know there are people there. The idea is to go there and take whatever the people have and murder the people. They state that is their plan in the first few minutes of the movie. So I don't think this is like a big, horrible character reveal for Ratcliffe, because this is exactly what he had planned to do the entire time.
Yeah. So anyway, night falls. Pocahontas and John Smith leave to meet up. Nakoma stops Pocahontas. She tries to stop Pocahontas to fail, so she tells Kocoum that Pocahontas wandered off. John is seen walking off by Thomas. Radcliffe tells Thomas to follow him and to shoot any native he sees, any paladin he sees. So Pocahontas and John Smith meet up at Grandmother Willow to try to find a way to prevent war from their respective people. With urging from Willow, John agrees to meet with the chief, but not before the two share a kiss. Hey, we need to go talk to your father, but first let's make out.
Yeah. John Smith only wanting one thing.
Men only wanting one thing, and I'll say that.
We need Sebastian the Crab to come and sing "Don't Kiss the Girl, There Are More Important Things." And knowing how Sebastian names his songs, that song would literally be called "Don't Kiss the Girl, There Are More Important Things."
But they're not alone. Thomas and Kocoum are watching. Thomas is shocked that John is kissing a native. Kocoum is ticked, because this is the girl that he wants to marry, and she's making out with another guy. And he attacks John. They have a bit of a fight. Thomas, wanting to protect his friend, shoots Kocoum. Kocoum falls. He grabs Pocahontas' necklace, shatters it. Kocoum is dead. That entire scene is beautifully drawn, beautifully animated, especially with the lesson that Thomas learned earlier in the film of keeping both eyes open when he shoots.
Yeah, it's because up until that point, if you've been paying attention to the movie and you remember that scene, you notice that he's got one eye closed, and you're thinking like, oh, good, he's only gonna wound Kocoum, but at least he'll stop the fight. And, you're kind of, like, not as terrified for that moment. And then he's like, oh, yeah, I should open my other eye. And you're like, uh-oh. Run, Kocoum, run.
Yeah, and this is kind of a big... Yeah, we're kind of told through the movie that we're not supposed to like Kocoum, but Kocoum hasn't really done anything bad in the movie.
And, here's the thing, is that some people take this as, like, Kocoum is jealous because this is the woman he has decided will be his wife, and that he's, again, the deleted scene, he's overly protective and stuff. But think about it this way. A bunch of unknown people have just arrived on your land. The first thing they do is start destroying the land, building, bringing out weapons of war and building fortifications of war, They shoot one of your people unprovoked, and then you show up in a forest and find one of them assaulting your fiancé. I can see where he might have taken it that way. We actually don't see Kocoum being like, how dare you kiss that man? That you are mine. It's not just that. He kind of comes up at the end of the thing and just sees them kissing, which he could have thought that was completely instigated by John Smith against Pocahontas' will.
He didn't have to shout, though. If he had just been quiet, he probably would have killed John.
But, maybe he wanted a fair fight and to get her out of the way, because if she was still close to him, then that he might have accidentally hurt her.
Possible.
She could have been used as a human shield,
Yeah, possible. But, Kocoum is not a fun-loving guy. They make that very clear in the movie, but he didn't really deserve to die.
Yeah, I don't really... You can say, in the movie as it stands, deleted scene aside, we don't actually see anything really that bad about Kocoum. Yes, he's a warrior, and he just presumably killed a bunch of people from a different tribe. But we don't actually know the nature of the disagreement between those two tribes. So we don't know if he's like, doing something horrible or just acting in defense of his people. And all we really have to suggest he's not a great guy in the film as it stands is that he doesn't smile much.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Coco,
You know,
the girls would like you if you smiled more.
he doesn't actually do anything throughout the movie to, like, inflame the war situation. I mean, he's ready to fight, but, you know, I mean, these people showed up at his house ready for a fight. You know,
Yeah.
what else are you going to do? We don't see him being particularly awful in any way, and it's very possible that the reason he attacks John Smith is because he thought Pocahontas was being attacked. I mean, that's a very ambiguous scene. So, yeah, I would say that although I do not necessarily blame Thomas, as by the time he takes the shot, Cocoam is about to kill his friend, you know.
From Thomas's point of view, he's protecting his friend.
Yeah. And from Cocoam's point of view, most likely he is protecting both his people and his fiancée. So this is an unfortunate situation, but it appears to be possibly a blameless situation. You know, everybody here thought they were doing the right thing.
Even John is protecting Thomas. Like, he was just protecting me. You know, don't get mad at him. Yes, he killed Coquelin. Like, yes, he did, but it's self-defense. John is trying to protect his friend. You know, he even tells again. That's right after this scene. He straight up tells Thomas to get out of there. He's protecting him.
Yeah.
He's taking the fall for Thomas.
Yeah.
And that he's ready to die for Thomas. Again, probably not the actual factual John Smith, but for the purpose of this movie, he is willing to literally risk his head for Thomas.
Yeah.
And John is taken by the Powhatans, and they carry Coquelin's dead body. That's kind of a sad moment right there. The way they lift him up, though, you know, Pocahontas' reaction as they lift his body is just beautifully drawn, and just the way the acting without words that Disney can do with their animation.
Yeah, I mean, when those animators are good, they're really good.
Again, this was the A-team, and you knew it was the A-team.
Yeah. The facial expressions in this one from pretty much all the characters are just super expressive, and freeze any frame of this film and you know exactly what a character is thinking without words, which is beautiful. I mean, bravo to them. That is animation at its best.
And Miko and Percy come to a truce in their little feud here. They after constantly fighting throughout the whole movie, during this scene, they've come to a truce.
Yeah.
This is good for them. They're not fighting anymore. They don't likely become friends at the end of the movie, but they've agreed to stop fighting. So John is taken to Chief Powhatan, and he is to be executed at dawn. Pocahontas is depressed that she will never see John again, but is helped with Nakoma to see him get into the tent where he's being held captive. Pocahontas tells John that it would have been better if they never met. None of this would have happened if we had never met, if I was never there, if you were never there, if this never happened, Coco will still be alive, you wouldn't be about to die, nothing else would have happened. John, smooth guy that he is, says probably the smoothest line any guy has ever said to a woman: "I'd rather die tomorrow than live 100 years without knowing you." Smooth.
Yeah. Although, there you go with John Smith maybe embellishing things a little too much. But yeah, it does come off as a relatively smooth line.
It's like, so we mentioned this with Beauty and the Beast. We mentioned it with The Lion King. When this movie got a re-release for the 10th anniversary, they added a new song. The song, If I Never Knew You. Now, the song was in the original version, a earlier version of the film, when they did test screenings for the film. The song did not do well in test screenings. This is the love song of the movie, but it didn't do well in test screenings. Most of the older audience kind of liked it, but children kind of thought it was boring. So it was made the decision to cut the song, even though the scene itself was 85-90% animated. So when they did the 10th anniversary re-release, they finished up the animation, put it back into the movie where it was. And it's a nice, very beautiful song. Mel Gibson's chops in this song is amazing. Mel Gibson is a great singer. Say what you want about him. He's not a great human being in real life, but dude can sing.
Really? You think so?
I thought he did a good job at it.
I thought there is one point near the beginning of the song where he goes to hit a high note, and everything in my vocal training just like shuddered. It was, I don't know, I think, is he off key? No. Is he a competent or trained singer? No.
Probably not.
He is very... If you heard him sing at karaoke, you'd be like, best of the night, awesome, go guy. If you hear him sing at a Disney film, opposite people who do this for a living, especially like Judy Kuhn, who, she's a Broadway veteran. It comes off as very lackluster to me. It's not as bad as some of the other ones, but I think when I saw that song, heard that song, I was like, that's why Mel Gibson only gets like one singing line in the finished version of the film. So I don't know. We had
casted a different actor. Would you have casted a stunt singer for Mel Gibson?
I would have cast a stunt singer for Mel Gibson. If he was gonna have like big love ballads like that, I would have probably gone that way. Yeah.
Hey, Jim Cummings, come back in. We got another song for you.
Jim Cummings, can you do like bland Disney Prince singing voice?
We don't need you to sing like Jeremy Irons. We just need you to sound like a regular old white guy.
Yeah. Jeremy Irons, of course, being a superior white guy. An exceptional white man.
The song itself is actually pretty good, honestly. John sings how Pocahontas changed his life, and through her, he found out how precious life is. Kind of an embellishment, but it works for a love song. And Pocahontas sings about how their love could have been beautiful, but she found it out that in this case, hate was a bit stronger. But, it works. It works as a Disney love song. It's not the best, but it works as a Disney love song.
I am going to agree with the test audiences. I found this a very boring song. I didn't hate it. There are certainly Disney songs I find much worse. But it was rather lackluster. In the history of Disney love ballads, this ain't it. I mean, for me at least. It's a personal taste thing, of course. But for me, this was a very... it was serviceable, but it's not gonna excite me. I don't want it at my wedding.
They actually keep the song for the end credits, though. So, yeah. Say what you will about that. Anyway, let's get back to the movie proper. Thomas runs back to Jamestown and tells the crew that John's been taken. Radcliffe takes this opportunity to kind of rile up the crowd again. John tried to befriend them, and look what they're doing to him. They have all our gold. We're going to go get him, despite the fact that the gold doesn't exist. And he rallies them up to attack at dawn, leading to our next song, Savages. Which, it's very much like the town song from Beauty and the Beast. This is, we're going to rile up the people and get them to do this thing.
Yeah, it's very Kill the Beast in the way it is set up.
Yeah. It has two of the best lines in any Disney song. They're not like you and me, which means they must be evil. They're different from us, which means they can't be trusted. That's early American history in two lyrics.
Yeah. This is the song that you really feel the Hammerstein influence on if you know his work. This has shades of a lot of the South Pacific stuff that kind of just, they look different, therefore they must be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And I really like what this song is trying to do. And I think it does it very well. I honestly think this is one of the best songs in the movie. I really, really, really like this one.
Mm-hmm. Can't really call this a villain song, but it, if you have to categorize it. Like we would categorize the Mob song as a villain-esque song. I don't know if you want to call this one or not, that one or not.
Yeah, I think we already got our villain song with Mine, Mine, Mine.
Yeah.
But this is more expositional, but it's also a more morality tale song.
Mm.
That we are supposed to be seeing there. But again, this is one of those that I take slight exception with, as much as I love it, because it is drawing a moral parity between the colonizers and the colonized, and I am not down with that, as much as I love the song. In any other context, if these were two equal warring nations or whatever, they're both at fault here. But no, this is a one-sided fault here. So, while some of the language, I guess, that the natives use in this song you can take exception with, I don't really see them as being morally equivalent sides. I think it would have been better in some ways if this had been entirely from the English point of view rather than a duet, counterpoint between the English and the natives.
And you get, David Ogden Sears and Jim Cummings doing this duet.
And it's great. I mean, I love that part.
Yeah.
I kind of love everything about this sequence except that little kind of ethical bit there.
Understandable. I do love the effect of the clouds of the two nations kind of meeting there, and the thunder kind of clash to end that first part of the song.
Yeah, it is a good, well-made sequence in its entirety. Yeah.
So this is just the song kind of gets split here, because this is the first half and the second half. And after that first half of the song, we go straight to Pocahontas back at Grandmother Willow, lamenting on how lost she feels. She specifically says that she feels lost. Miko, remembering earlier in the movie, gives Pocahontas the compass. It's the spinning arrow from her dream, and it's pointing to John Smith. She can still make it in time to save him. Run, Pocahontas, run!
Eagle, help my feet to fly. Yeah.
And then we get the second half of the song with Pocahontas kind of singing over it.
Yeah, I really like Pocahontas's portions of this song.
Yeah.
It's a good counterpoint to the what the others are singing. It gets a little muddled at the end because you do have all three converging, and without captions, it can be a little hard to distinguish what each is saying. But that's the nature of those things, no matter who writes them. So
ain't no subtitles on Broadway.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Well, I mean, there are, but yeah. I think the best line in the song, to me, is when they say, "Destroy their evil race until there's not a trace left." I think that is really the summation of the intent of the colonizers at this point. Whether it was, I mean, Ratcliffe very specifically wants to kill them at the beginning of the movie. Mm-hmm. There were other ways of quote-unquote wiping out the savages, just culturally, religiously, linguistically. So that idea, I think, is even more the crux of, the ethical crux of this. Even though I think that the song definitely wants the morality tale to be like, oh, they look different than us, therefore they're evil. I think the real heart of the song is that we want to destroy them utterly and completely.
So if it was just Radcliffe and the Englishman saying we're going to kill all these savages, it'd be a better scenario for you.
I think it would be a better song with a greater moral lesson. Because I think that as it is portrayed in this film specifically, okay, that the natives are entirely justified in what they're thinking at this point. Because they've seen nothing else. Mm-hmm. They have seen completely one-sided. Now, is it completely one-sided? No. History is never completely one-sided in its entirety. But as portrayed in this film, I don't think there's any reason to be casting moral aspersions on the way the natives are reacting in that moment. So, I don't know.
So, back to the film. As the two armies march towards each other, John is laid down to be killed. And the chief has his staff up. He's going to bash his head in. Pocahontas makes it just in time to throw herself onto John, saving him, which is kind of a well-known image. I mean, there's a painting of that, of Pocahontas laying on top of John Smith protecting him.
Yeah, and if you know any legend of Pocahontas, it's gonna be this one scene.
Yeah.
What did Pocahontas do? Well, she saved John Smith by laying down and keeping her father from beating his brains in. John Smith did write about this. Mm-hmm. He wrote that this was a thing that happened. However, as with much of the writings of John Smith, how much of it actually happened is debatable. We do know that Pocahontas was seen as a peacemaker between her people and the people of Jamestown. We do know that she was revered at the time for having caused a peace. It was even called the Peace of Pocahontas. Okay? Whether or not it came from an event like this, or it seems more likely that it came from her eventual conversion to Christianity and baptism and marriage to John Rolfe being the thing that kind of cemented that peace. Whether or not this particular thing actually happened, especially in the way it happened, given what we know about John Smith's writing, it seems that this might have been another one of his tall tales about himself, and it seems that probably what really happened was that Pocahontas kind of just talked to her father and said, hey, we should be, whether or not John Smith's life was on the line in that moment is kind of a debated academic thing. But
it makes a nice visual in the movie.
Yeah, it makes for a great story, which is why it has lasted so long and, really taken over who the real woman was. Whether or not this happened, this is how history remembers her.
So Pocahontas laying on top of John saying, this is what hate has led to. The chief sees his daughter's wisdom and lets John go. The killing will not start with him, he says. And it's not bad, that whole reasoning. I don't know how to probably put that into words. It's just odd that he was just. My daughter tells me to let him go, so I'm gonna let him go.
Yeah. And also, once again, I think that this story, if you want to tell a story about how two sides should learn to respect each other and live together, this is not the story you should really use as the backdrop for that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's too much real world consequence to using what happened to the native tribes of the Americas and what is still happening to this day to their descendants to really make this a nice, everybody should come together and hold hands and sing a song around the fire. It's not, this is not the thing to make that point with. There are other points you could make here. This isn't the one. If this had been an entirely fictional movie in a fictional land, and let's be honest, minor spoiler alert for Frozen 2, pause if you don't want to hear it or whatever, but they do this kind of
you know what?
Weird colonizer better in that. That's all I'm going to say. That's it. I'm not going to spoil.
I would have said Avatar because that would have been a closer analogy.
Avatar, I think, has even more problems on some levels than Pocahontas, so maybe not. But Frozen 2, despite the fact that it does still have some problems there, I think comes much, much closer to telling a very similar story in a much better, more culturally sensitive, I guess, kind of way. So where there was outrage among Native peoples when this movie came out, I think that this is probably what they were really responding to. Like I said, I can't speak for everybody, and I don't try to, but I could see this being a real sticking point. That the moral of this movie seems to be, hey, when somebody shows up on your land and tries to commit genocide, maybe you should just learn to be nicer to them. And
if you have any Native American listeners, drop us a comment and
please. I would love to know more from people actually in this culture. But my understanding and my outsider perspective is that I don't really think that the moral they decided to go with is an appropriate moral given the historical context.
Okay, that I will accept that. I will accept that. So Radcliffe, he's not happy with this whole thing at all. He wants them. He sees this as an opening and orders the men to fire, but they won't. John's been let go. There's no need to fight. The reason for the fight is not there anymore, so doesn't need to be fight. Probably the most unrealistic thing in this movie. Going to be honest with you. Radcliffe then grabs a gun himself and aims at the chief. John, seeing what's about to happen, shoves the chief off and takes the bullet. Takes the bullet for a man he doesn't even know. Just happens to be this girl's father. The Englishman, seeing that Radcliffe has shot John, instantly turn on him. Again, probably another one of those unrealistic things, but whatever, Disney movie. They tie him down and take him away.
One of the few Disney villains who does not meet death as an end.
No. He's actually alive at the end of the movie. And again, he's in the sequel. Little spoiler for you.
And I'm okay with it. Because I don't know, except for the death of Kocoum, which was, like we said, kind of understandable in the moment why that happened, as unfortunate and tragic as it was. What Ratcliffe does directly is fortunately bloodless. You know, we get one person wounded with a gunshot to the leg. We get another wounding in a second, but you know, we get John here in this scene, which was an accident that it was John, but I think that having Ratcliffe meet a bloody end here would have undercut what moral they were trying to go with. So I'm kind of okay with the fact that he just kind of gets tied up and thrown back on the ship. Yeah.
So later, we don't know how much later, but close enough that John is still injured. The Englishmen are packing up the ship home to get John the medical help he needs. 4 months with a bullet wound on the ship. That's not a good sign there.
Realistically, John Smith would have died of this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
At least, I don't know what they had. If they were able to kind of keep infection down.
Which makes me wonder,
maybe.
Wouldn't they have a doctor go on that ship with them in case of this situation, or no?
It depended on if there was a doctor available. Usually, no. A lot of actual colonist ships, once the initial expedition had gone out and settled something, and then they actually brought settler colonists to come, they would have brought somebody with some medical knowledge if they could find one. But these kind of early expedition ships, it tended to be a toss-up from my understanding, whether or not there would have been like what you would consider a proper doctor. Usually there would have been like a guy on the ship that knew a little bit about basic triage first aid care that we would call today.
So, as they're about to leave, Pocahontas arrives with her people bringing food for the ship. She also brings some of Grandmother Little's bark to help with the pain.
Aspirin! If you didn't know, that's where we get aspirin.
Chief Powhatan gives the cloak off his back onto John Smith and calls him brother. That's a good sign of respect right there.
Yeah.
Looks like Percy is sticking around, though. He and Miko have fixed Pocahontas' necklace.
Yeah.
How they were able to do that? Disney cartoon.
Raccoons have very human-like hands that are very, very dexterous. A pug probably couldn't do anything with it, but I could see a raccoon maybe figuring out how to thread a bead. If you've never actually watched like a raccoon dig through something, it's kind of terrifying how human-like their paws can be.
So John wants Pocahontas to come with him, but her people need her. One last goodbye, and John is taken onto the ship. Pocahontas runs to the cliff we saw at the beginning of the movie to see the ship sail away as John and her wave to each other one last time, and that's the end of the movie. So let's just say this straight up. Does Pocahontas hold up as a Disney classic?
I would say that no, it absolutely does not, with the caveat that I don't think there was anything to uphold. I was not particularly fond of this movie when it came out, and I think it's only gotten worse as an adult. I try to give these movies as much of a fair shot as possible, but this one bored me to tears through 90% of it.
I hate saying this, but I'm going to agree with you on that. Pocahontas was never really one of my favorite movies during the Renaissance era. It feels like it needed a few more rewrites to get the movie right.
Go
ahead.
I'm sorry. I think that the script is absolutely the fault here. I think the animation was stellar. I think that the musical team of Menken and Schwartz is an excellent team. I mean, we've already talked about them before and how much we love their work together. I think the voice cast was great. I think what Disney wanted this film to do was very laudable, but I think the script fell short by miles. I mean, what is your feeling on that? Was it just script for you, or was there something else?
It feels like if they wanted to do something historically based, maybe a little bit more of the historical accuracy. I understand why they have the Disney magic in there. I get it. But if you're going to do something like this, try to do, and again, limited actual factual documents of these events exist, and most of them are tall tales from a man trying to exaggerate his adventures. But I don't know. It just feels like they tried to do. It feels like two people's idea of what they wanted this movie to be. One wanted to do a factual historical film about an American legend. Another wanted to do a Disney princess movie.
And also, one of the people was very obviously, this is trying to be Romeo and Juliet, or if you want to bring it closer, West Side Story. Same deal. This wants to be the star-crossed lovers from warring factions that, and I think if they had wanted to do this as a film, they should have made it two native tribes. If you want to do a movie about natives set in the Americas with a romance between warring factions, make it two tribes on equal footing.
Agreed. That would have been a much better movie.
I would have liked to have seen that movie, and it would have not been nearly as upsetting and problematic in its morality.
Or they could have just done straight up. Well, I would have said we could do Romeo and Juliet, but the Disney ending of Romeo and Juliet,
yeah.
To be fair, they did end up doing Romeo and Juliet with Lion King too.
Yeah. That is true. I mean, they stuck with the Shakespearean themes there for the Lion King movies, but I want to see more movies about the natives of the Americas, the various, numerous cultures that existed here prior to Europeans, showing up. Not really the kind of Viking expeditions. Those were slightly less horrific, which is weird, at least to the entire continent. But, I don't want to see a colonization story about natives. I want to see a native story about natives. And I think that Disney could have done something amazing with this if they wanted to bring a native perspective into this. Because, let's face it, you put the Disney animation logo on anything, and it's gonna get eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be like this movie did one day in theaters and stopped. Like, it's Pocahontas is kind of considered the flop of the Disney Renaissance, but it really wasn't. I mean, financially speaking, it made its money back. It had an Oscar-winning song. It's just not as well liked, and I think for good reason, as some of the other ones. But Disney absolutely had, at this point, because the Renaissance had kicked into full gear and they had regained their status as the great animation studio they once were, they could have found a native story, a legend, a myth, a real historical story that we have something about native people and just left the colonization of the Americas out of it. So I think that the best thing they could have done, and I would still like to see it today. You know, if anybody at Disney miraculously ever hears this, do that now. You know, you did it with Moana, and that was great. Moana was amazing. Why don't you go back and do just a different story about natives in the American continent prior to colonization or after colonization, but still have it be a story about that culture? I would love to see that, and it would probably not earn you as much controversy as Pocahontas did, and still does in some respects.
Yeah, we'll get this one out of the way. Watch the Lindsay Ellis video on this.
Yeah.
Say it.
I think we say that every time. But if you really want a kind of more, you know, only one of us here has the academic background of that thing, but Lindsay Ellis definitely does. So yeah, go watch that as a counterpoint.
Yeah, and I understand that, you know, there are people who do love this movie, and I understand why they would love this movie. A lot of them are not fans of the historical Pocahontas or the historical John Smith. They want the fantasy. And I understand that. Even people who straight up deny or hate the sequel, they deny the sequel exists because they want John Smith to come back and marry Pocahontas and have a bajillion kids together. And I think that's not what happened. That's not, you know, what you want as a fantasy. This is not, and I understand that. I understand that if all you know of the Pocahontas story is this movie, I understand why you like it, and I understand why you do not like the historical Pocahontas. But it's almost like the what actually happened in history, if they made it more like that, would be sort of a better movie than what this is. At least in my opinion.
And honestly, I really do think that the best way to have gone would have just been to not even set this with a historical backdrop. Just make this a fantasy. There are some good ideas here. There are some good morals in the intent.
If it had been something like a fantasy king had sent people to a new island that they discovered, and there's these people that already live there, and you want to make a fantasy movie about that, fine. And this is the story you want to tell, fine. But the way this movie ended up, yeah. And I am not gonna hate on people who love this movie. And if this is one of your favorite Disney movies of all time, more power to you. Not exactly my cup of tea.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in you like what you like. That's fine. And there are very good things that I still like about this movie. I really love the, you know, Miko and Percy. I really do.
There are parts of this movie that are really, really great.
Yeah,
but
parts of this movie are elevated, but I do think, as a whole, and I want Disney to stay away from historical figures. I really do. Just in general, I would very much appreciate it if Disney Animation would stay away from historical figures. I really want Disney Animation to be an allegory for life. I want it to be a fantastical version of life. I really want it to not to stay away from real world concepts. That's not what I mean. Because Frozen 2 is very political in much the same way. Mm-hmm. Every Disney movie deals with some kind of real world issue or moral, and I think they would be poorer if they did not. But I do not want us to bring in actual human people who lived and died and, you know, had their own experiences into it. Because there's no way you can put that into a Disney movie and be historically accurate, I think. And I don't want to disrespect the memory of these people at all. I mean, Pocahontas as a woman was a young child caught up in wartime between two peoples. She was kidnapped and used as a bargaining chip at an early age. She gave up her culture and her religion, took a different name. There is question on how much of that was her own choice, and we will never know because we do not have her voice in this.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. She became Rebecca.
She became Rebecca. In fact, after she took that name, she was known to disavow her previous names at all. Pocahontas was not her real name. Pocahontas was a nickname. She disavowed any of her native names. She disavowed the culture of her people, the religion of her people. She was baptized a Christian, and died proclaiming that religion. But she did all this while being a captive. So, you want to give Belle issues for being, Stockholm Syndrome of the Beast. No, that really did happen to Pocahontas, and it happened when she was at a very young age. She was maybe 13, I think, when that happened. So without her voice in this, we don't know how much of that was actually her choice and her real feelings, or something she did as a survival mechanism. And I will not speculate either way on that. I'm willing to believe either of those things happened. But she was a woman with a very difficult and very complicated life, that I do not think we honor in an appropriate way by allowing people like John Smith to write her history. And unfortunately, Disney allowed John Smith to write her entire history in this movie. And I wish they had not had done that. I would have rather they just completely ignored this idea in favor of another one.
And there's, not to leave it on a downer, but there's really nothing else we can really say about this movie that isn't restating anything we've already said.
Yeah, I mean, bravo to the creative team for trying what they did. I know their hearts were in the right place, and I am not going to disavow that. Every part of this production really did bring their A game. But I think that it was sort of doomed to failure from the beginning because of the subject matter they chose.
So let's talk about next week. Let's move on. We've already done everything we can talk about Pocahontas. Bless my soul, Perk is on a roll, and that's where we're going next week. We are going from colonized America to ancient Greece.
Yeah, and fully mythology.
Full mythology
at this point, which I'm glad of. I will be glad to be there.
So and the next movie in the list is Hunchback. We've already done Hunchback, so we'll go on to Hercules. That's where we're going next week with
Hopefully that will be a much lighter episode, but thank you for sticking with us through this one.
Thank you for this one. Again, if you are a Native American or know of a Native American that wants to give their own opinion on this movie, we want to hear it. We want to hear from someone who actually has some kind of cultural connection. So we're going next week from Mel Gibson to James Woods.
That's a lateral move at best.
Oh boy.
Well, I promise you I will try not to harp on it too much. Just a little harping. A little harping. Small harp. A liar, perhaps.
So next week we've got Disney's Hercules, and because, what best way to talk about ancient Greece than gospel music?
Yeah.
More on that when we get there. So thank you guys for sticking with us for this 2.5-hour podcast. You know what you're getting into.
Yeah. Rewatching the magic. You knew what this was.
So, again, thank you guys for listening. Come back next week for Hercules. And that's all we can say about that. So, goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Rewatching the Magic. We invite you to keep the magic going by joining the conversation online. Find us on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic, on Twitter at Rewatch the Magic, and of course, find all new episodes at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com. Until next time, remember, the magic is for everyone. It only stops if you let it.